Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 89. We are honored to have with us again Tony McMillen. He's the creator behind the heavy metal horror novel An Augmented Fourth, the sci-fi fantasy graphic novel Lumen, Serious Creatures, which he talked about when he was on here last fall about his comic book series about a teenage special effects artist working in Hollywood. And now, Attaboy, an oversized treasury edition graphic novel disguised as a video game instruction manual, which is, as of this recording, out on Kickstarter. You've already reached your goal. Congratulations, Tony.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the show. This is exciting stuff.
It's a total pleasure. I appreciate you having me back. I love hearing the list of stuff I've done. It makes me feel good about myself. You know, it's good. Yeah, Attaboy is doing really good. I think we have 15 days left in the Kickstarter. It reached the goal. I think it's at 150% funded, or so love to get to 200%. Love to get to 500%, but we'll see what we do.
And so I was watching this progression of this, and I was surprised about how quick of a turnaround you already put it on the Kickstarter. Like, I thought this was going to be like a couple of years or something, but you turned it around didn't you start this back in October?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, I am really worried that I'm going to die someday. So I'm just trying to get out as much material as possible. And, it's funny because I love artists who go on really good runs, like of a band like the Rolling Stones had these 4 great albums in a row. I really think that's cool, and so I think I'm on a good run. And I mean, hopefully, Attaboy isn't like the one that destroys, like knocks all over. But I think people are gonna like it. But I figure after this, maybe 1 or 2 more projects, and then there'll be a break, and then I can finally breathe, and then I'll start phase 2 of whatever I'm doing with my career. But I have a lot of things are always cooking. So when one thing's done, there's usually at least 1 or 2 things that are ready to go if I want to, indulge in them.
Because you also too, since we talked to you last September, you also have a podcast now.
Yeah. Can I say the S word, the curse word, or should I bleep it out?
The name, bleep it out. You can say
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. The podcast is called Too Young for This sh_t. It's about action movies and about the action movies I grew up on. And so me and my friend Peter Leon co-host together, and we have a lot of guests, a lot of comic book artists or guests on the show. And it's been fun to kind of just revel in nostalgia for action films, and just talking about like being especially young boys in America in the 80s and 90s, kind of just being like mainline to this stuff. And it's a lot of it's pretty silly, but we also have a lot of affection for it. So it's been fun to discuss that with various people, and I've had guests from Nova Scotia, and so sort of international, getting people who all love these movies, for better or for worse.
Well, technically it is international if you've had someone from Nova Scotia.
There you go, so
right.
we're cosmopolitans. We're keeping it pretty classy. But it's been fun. I've been talking about doing it for a long time. My buddy Pete Leon was like, last year we said we're going to do this. I was like, okay, I'm done with Serious Creatures. Okay, let's do this podcast. And we actually finished the first season. There's 12 episodes. You can find it on any podcast, like Apple Podcast, and then you listen to.
Right.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of scheduling. I'm sure you're aware of how much work that can be. I think next season, less guests. We're kind of streamlining it a little bit because it was a lot for me to handle.
So yeah, talk about the 12 episodes. What were they? So is it each episode you talk about a different movie?
We did sort of a half and half. So 6 episodes are about a movie apiece, right? We'll pick Aliens or Predator or Demolition Man. The other 6 are sort of like open-ended questions, like what's rank the action heroes? Right. Let's talk about the best Die Hard ripoffs. Let's talk about Arnold Schwarzenegger as a concept. And that was so. I think those are. I like them both, but those can be really fun if you have a good guest or two to kind of really get kind of heady about lowbrow culture, which is my favorite kind of mixture.
Oh, so when does next season start for that?
I do not know. I was just trying to finish this season, and so it might be a while because I got some other things to do. I'm going to take a little bit of a summer break, a little bit. Right. Although it's not real. I have something I am going to work on. There's nothing I'm going to release, but it'll come out soon. But the 12 episodes, they're all out there now in the wild, and I think they're really fun. And Peter Leon, he's my good friend. We used to be in a band together. I've known him since high school. He's great because he has no pretensions. So I can be kind of like really smart, kind of creator, artsy type, and he's always like, that's not. He's like, stop putting on airs. and he's very nonchalant. And so I think it's a fun mixture of us politely arguing over nonsense, and our guests sort of being the referees.
Well, but if you ever talk about like Romancing the Stone or Jewel of the Nile or Firewalker, I'm your man. I'll come in and talk to you about it.
I love those movies. When I was a kid, especially the first one, Jewel of the Nile. Or you know,
the Romancing the Stone.
Yeah, the alligator boots. As a kid, I always remembered that. I was like, that's the coolest. And I love Danny DeVito. Danny DeVito had a really good run in the 80s and 90s, and of course, Taxi. So as a kid, I thought he was the greatest. You know, I just rewatched Batman Returns. I was like, oh, he's so good as Penguin.
I loved that movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that was the movie. I remember that, and I still remember to this day with the opening night of that, because I had a huge crush on Michelle Pfeiffer. June 19th was opening night of Batman Returns.
I'm sure she remembers too, man. You know, like she's amazing in that film. Like I never dismissed her, but like rewatching, I was like, I didn't remember how good she is in every scene. She just makes the most of it, and she's even some sort of clunky lines she can deliver. Like when she says meow, it can be really kind of dorky, but she just makes it work. She sells it. I love it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some great, and also too, there's some great ways. The benefit of doing your type of podcast right now is that if you're doing it like 10 years ago or 50, you don't have direct access to all these classic, all these 80s, 90s movies. Basically, you can find anything you want to talk about. You can either watch it through a streaming service or rent it through a streaming service now.
Oh, yeah. It's almost, and most of these movies are really popular films, so like it's not too hard to find. But yeah, there's almost no excuse. We're not going to watch. We're not looking for obscure like French new wave films that are hard to find. You know, these are big blockbuster films for the most part. Right. But it's been fun rewatching those films too, because you know, as an adult, some things become kind of campy and fun. But there's also sometimes some things I'm like, no, I still am very attached to this. I have this like I don't know, this sort of like built-in memory of loving this, and it'll stay with me. So that's been fun to discuss. And we always end each episode, if we talk about a film, we always go, is this a good action movie, or is this a great movie, or just a great action film? Because we have a kind of distinction. Right. And most of the ones we cover kind of end up being both. They end up being a great film as well as a great action film, I think.
Wow, that's awesome. I have it on there. I have it queued up too on your podcast. I'm excited. I've been waiting, because ever since COVID, I haven't been able to need to drive and go to meetings and stuff like that. So I haven't been able to listen to the podcast yet, but I'm excited to listen to that stuff.
It's funny. My co-host Peter Leon, like episode 3, we were talking about like the format. He's like, I don't listen to podcasts. I never listened to a podcast in my entire life. I was like, you want to be the co-host and you haven't listened to it? He's like, no. And he's like, I live in Arizona. I don't, I drive. It's like not that long to get to work. And I'm like, oh, because I live in Massachusetts. I take the subway. I'm like so used to podcasts. I always like that's a big part of my day. And even if lockdown, I like to jog, and there's always a good excuse to listen to a podcast. So, I would love to help somebody forget about their day for 40 minutes out of their day.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. And also too is like, I don't know where you get the time for all this stuff. As I say, you're working on projects. You're a dad. You got a job. You got all kinds of stuff going on for you. So, so one of these days we should probably just talk about how you actually manage your task management. I think is.
Yeah, I'm really bad at everything else I do except this creative stuff. So I'm terrible father, terrible husband, bad worker. And it shows. My life is in shambles, but I have a podcast now and I have a comic book. So, that's my trick is, always just find a way to put off anything that's serious and important and just do something that's nonsense.
You're a great dad. Who are you kidding?
Thank you. No, it's funny. Being a dad and your father yourself, I'm sure you understand this. Becoming a father, it made me realize how much time there actually is in a day if you do not waste any time, because you kind of have to find like, okay, I have an hour, it's free. What can I do in that hour? And before I had a kid, I just kind of, it's, la da da da. It's become a real wake up call. Like, okay, well, you have this small window. What can you do?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And speaking about that too, let's just jump right in and talk about Attaboy. You talked about Attaboy as a, what'd you say? So basically you said it was a based off of a video game that may or may not have existed.
Yeah, and so what's fun about the book is there's almost three stories at once happening. And so one story is this is a video game I remember as a kid, and no one else seems to remember it, and so it becomes sort of a Mandela effect kind of story. Like, why doesn't anyone remember this game? Why do I remember it? And that's one aspect. And another aspect of the story is the story of the game itself, which is a little boy robot named Attaboy who loses his father, who's Dr. Atta, and he's gonna fight the evil motherboard to get kind of justice. And the third level is a really weirdly, despite all this fantastic robot sci-fi kind of action, it's a really personal story about me growing up and kind of thinking about the escapism of a child of video games and comic books and other things like that, where sort of trying to get away from some things in real life that I didn't like so much, and the good and the bad that happens if you grow up and you don't kind of ever grow out of that. And so at the same time, I think those are three different things that are happening at once, but the story can be really fun and just kind of breezy if you want it to be, and there's little nooks and crannies that are a little deeper if you want to kind of follow those rabbit holes. And so it's a really strange project. I was describing it as David Lynch's Mega Man, which I don't know if that's exactly accurate, but kind of gives you an idea of what the weird mixture of things is going to be. But you see like there's pages like it works as a video game manual in some pages where there's like just instructions and there's like character, like different bosses you fight, and there's tips and tricks, but there's also, it's a comic book adventure and there's a story there. And then some of the narration is kind of that personal edge to it. And so one of the tricks was like, I don't know any other books like this, so I don't know what to look to for examples of how to do this. So I had to kind of just carve my own path.
Right. Now, so when you're talking to some people about this, have they said, "Oh, you like you said, Mega Man"? Is there any other homages that you see from some other classic games as well?
Yeah, so it's funny. Despite there's definitely a lot of Mega Man, and Mega Man is, of course, there would be no Mega Man without Astro Boy, and so and Astro Boy, is something I've always known about. I've never honestly read Astro Boy, but I'm aware of it, and I love his look and visual. But there's a lot of stuff about, like, I'm a big Zelda fan, and so when I was a kid, I had an older cousin who was playing Zelda, and the game was actually a little too complex for me. But I loved the manual because the manual is fully illustrated, and there's all these beautiful illustrations. And this is before I read The Hobbit or even watched like the movie Willow. So this is sort of my first fantasy story, was the Zelda manual. And I always thought it was a really, on its own, a cool piece of art. And so that was the biggest inspiration for Attaboy, is I was trying to capture the Zelda manual's kind of magic. It's it told a full story all on its own, even if you never played the game. And so that was one of the big things. But there's visuals that are really inspired by like Metroid. I love Metroid. It's almost all these are going to be inspired by like old Nintendo games. That's the system I grew up on. So there's some Super Mario Brothers 2, there's some Metroid, a little Contra, lots of Mega Man, and then there's other inspiration which is from comics and movies too, and other things. But the games, of course, are right there on the surface, I think.
And this is was it 74 pages?
Yeah, it's huge, and it's oversized too. So it's like, it's really big. But
let me get you right up there.
But it's near treasury size, and 74 pages. It's almost like 3 issues of a comic, or even I guess a little more. But what's great about it is, with the size of it, I could really indulge in making the art as impactful as I want it to be, like a widescreen kind of movie thing.
Right.
But also 74 pages, I could take my time with the actual story beats and keep it breezy, but it's just full of fun stuff, and like stuff like this. There's a lot of homages. Like that's an actual riff on Jack Kirby's Captain Victory. There's a great 2-page spread in Captain Victory, which I always loved, and so I try to do a tribute to that with stuff like that. And so there's little homages to that, and a bunch of other books I love.
So what was your reasoning behind doing it as a oversized treasury size?
Yeah. So the first treasury size book I ever read was probably Big Guy and Rusty the Boy Robot from Frank Miller and Jeff Darrow. And I like that a lot. Actually, that's another boy robot. But I liked that a lot, and I liked how big everything looked. And of course, Jeff Darrow's art is so detailed that really helped. And he did the same thing with Hard Boiled, where oversized kind of really helped you see the details. But then years later, Eric Larson did a book called Herculean. Herculean was this treasury sized giant book, and I was like, when I saw that book, I was like, oh man, this feels like a rock concert. This is more than just a comic book. Like, this feels so big, and all the action just really leapt off the page. And so I got really into that format. But I kept thinking, I have to use the right story for that. It has to be action packed. It has to be big and bright. Something that would really benefit from being giant. So like serious creatures wasn't right. And when I kept thinking about Attaboy, I was like, oh man, it'd be really fun to because especially because video game manuals are so small, to go the opposite route and make this giant video game manual. And I did think, initially a lot of video game manuals from the Nintendo were they're sort of their landscape format. They're more rectangular. And so I tried a few pages like that, and I realized early on the only problem with doing a widescreen comic is that if you do a double page spread, they're all double page spreads in a way.
Right.
It doesn't really have the same effect. And so I thought it'd be more useful to have a normal rectangular comic that every once in a while there's a double page spread that makes it a little more impactful. But after thinking about Treasury editions, I finally bought some old Marvel Treasury editions. I got the Thor one by Kirby, and that's beautiful. And I was like, this is, if I had my druthers, like, every comic would be huge. And it's funny, I read some manga and some books that are kind of manga size where they shrink them down. And that's fine. It's cool. You take it to the beach, put it in your back pocket. But in general, I want to see art really big. And there's some minuses. Like, sometimes, art can benefit from being shrunk down a little bit, like a regular comic book size. But also sometimes things really benefit from being giant. And so with this book, what's cool about I could do big splash pages, but I also could do really dense panel pages. I wasn't worried about doing 20 panels on a page because you can read it. You can read it just fine. They're not going to be, you're not going to get lost.
Right. So how did you, just from a perspective of just the design and creation perspective, was this all digitally? Because you do live draws.
Yeah. So basically, I still draw almost everything on paper with ink.
Okay.
But I color digitally. And sometimes if I make a little mistake, like I don't like the way I drew an eye or a part of a face or a finger, I will digitally fix little things. But usually it's all it's ink on paper, and mostly I have no problem with digital art per se. But the way I draw, how messy and kind of organic it is, I can't really do that on with digital means, at least not yet. So I prefer like drawing with ink. I use a Pilot parallel pen for most of my art, which is a chisel tip pen. Okay. So it gives that really kind of it's a weird texture. It looks almost like wood block kind of stuff sometimes. And so I really kind of embraced being me, and I think that's been the best bet I've ever taken. So like I hope that when people see these pages, if they know who I am, they go, oh, that looks like Tony. That it doesn't look like anybody else.
Right. Now, because I remember, the other day I was watching one of your live streams as you're drawing, and I was fascinated just by watching you as you. It was almost like you almost had a paintbrush, but you said it's like a wide tip.
Yeah, it's great, and if you can fill with ink cartridges, and that's something I started doing, I think about 5 or 6 years ago, using that pen, and I haven't looked back. And one of the reasons why is, I used to use like a crow quill, dip my pen, and then use some paint brushes also to fill in blacks. And what I like about this Pilot parallel pen is that it's the only tool I need, so I don't need to switch tools. And so I kind of liken it to in film, when they started using the digital cameras, the one big benefit, although I think actual film does look better, but the benefit of digital cameras is that they don't have to wait for dailies. You can shoot something and then immediately go, oh, how'd that look? Great. And just keep going. So you can just keep rolling. And so with me doing this, I don't ever have to pause if I don't want to. And sometimes the pause is good, actually, but it also, there's a flow, and it could be unbroken. I can just keep drawing with this one tool. If I need a big black smear, I can do that. If I do a fine line thing, I can do that with this pen, just using the edge of it. So it's sort of a Swiss Army knife for me. And so I think it's really helped my my style, and also helped me just kind of just kind of have if I want to get into real, like, almost like a fugue state of drawing, I can just never have to stop until I run out of ink and then I have to, reload it.
So I'm curious as well. I love talking about world building in a bit. Is like, do you have? I remember we talked about it when we were talking about serious creatures. Obviously, serious creatures was not connected to lumens or any of that stuff. It was its own. It was its own world basically. Is there any Easter eggs or something for any of your Tony that your Tony readers that would find in any of this?
Oh yeah, I can't help myself. So what's fun too is actually in Serious Creatures, there's a guy wearing an Attaboy shirt.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and there's also somebody wearing an Apple Owl shirt, which is a character from Lumen. So in this one, there's a scene with Attaboy, and he has a bunch of power ups. And so one of the power ups is a little shark symbol, a triangular shark, which is from Serious Creatures. That's like the Jaws kind of shark. And then there's also an Apple Owl symbol again. And there's actually a part where Attaboy in this book says "bip," and "bip's" sort of like the catchphrase for Esteban from Lumen. And what's funny was, Serious Creatures is kind of more separate than these other two, but
Right.
I am thinking about doing a team up book of Attaboy and Lumen. Like, it's one of the things I've been thinking about doing a team book with those two guys and two other new characters. I've been reading old Defenders books lately. I'm like, oh, it'd be really fun to have like a weird kind of a mismatched team that doesn't really get along, that's on a bunch of adventures. So I think one of these days I'm going to pull that off.
Well, what you could do is make an instruction manual, but have it based off of kind of like a Street Fighter thing, where you have all your
Oh,
characters.
I love that. Yeah, it's funny. One of the projects I don't think I'm gonna do it, but I was gonna enlist a bunch of artists to do sort of pinups. Is like, I want to do a fighting game manual, and I was gonna call it Melee on Main Street. It's about a suburban fighting game.
Mhm.
So they're different people, like, the crossing guard, the mailman, the ice cream man, all these different like kind of suburban icons fighting each other. But I got so many things going on. I just never like followed through with it. But I love fighting games, and I love actually all the characters. So that's something to be really fun.
What is your so with that said, how many, as a previous guest taught me this term, whips, works in progress? How many like WIPs do you have floating in there that and is there anything more we can look forward to for any of your existing IPs like Lumen or Attaboy now?
Yeah, definitely. I think everyone has a million ideas. So I have a million ideas. If they're any good or if they're going to happen, who knows? But the things that I know are going to happen is that with Lumen, I want to do more Lumen. I actually have an idea called Lumen: The Lost Levels. An idea would be to do 3 or 4 issues, which are like the first, it'll be a little mini series, but the first issue will say Lumen 100, issue 159 or issue 32, and it'd be out of order, and you'll sort of get this weird sort of like, it's like when you get a bunch of back issues at a comic book
Yeah.
shop, and you're like, this is Fantastic Four number 300, and then this is issue 17, and you're like, I don't know how this relates to each other, but so it'd be kind of fun to do a weird story like that, and have like stories that take place way in the future of what we read last time in Lumen, and then stories that take place in the past even. So
Right.
that's something I've been kind of dreaming about, because I love Lumen. There's a lot more territory to kind of mark out there, but it's not going to happen anytime soon, because the next comic book is going to be Serious Creatures Volume 2, which will
Right.
complete that story. So I have 6 more issues to make of that, and that's definitely going to be like if issue 1 doesn't come out by the end of this year, it's going to be the beginning of next year. But I'm really looking forward to kind of completing that story. And it's funny doing Attaboy. Part of it was doing Serious Creatures. I was like, okay, I'm kind of tired of drawing like park benches and real people and stuff, like ordinary stuff. And Attaboy was cool to go the opposite route. But now I'm kind of missing drawing normal stuff a little bit, or at least people in t-shirts and more conversational stuff. So it'd be cool to return to that. But then in between that, I had these 2 prose novels, which I wrote 3 years ago, and they've been sitting there. And so I'm going to go over them one more time, and I'm going to finally publish them. They're a connected piece. There was going to be a trilogy, but I just kind of turned it into 2 books, and that's called Higher Climbs the Fire, and that should be coming out this year.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so and that should be really cool. I've been describing it as like it's like Mark Twain's Dune. It's like this, yeah, it's like a folk rock kind of sci-fi epic. It's like if Bob Dylan was Bob Dylan was in the middle of the Dune world or something. It's really weird, But and that's actually it's fun about that is that connects everything. So if you read that story, there's little bits of Attaboy, little bits of Lumen, little bits of Augmented Fourth. It's almost like that's like sort of the linchpin of my whole little universe, and it
It's
hasn't
like
come
your
out
Dark
yet.
Tower series of the.
That's exactly what I was thinking. It is exactly my Dark Tower series.
Yeah.
It talks about multiple universes and stuff like that, so it kind of makes sense. But I've been sitting on that for years. I think some of my best stuff, so I can't wait to get that out there.
Right.
But I have so many weird ideas that I hope I get them ready. But it's like I play guitar and I write songs, and a lot of times I'll make a riff and it's not ready yet. There's something cool there, but it'll be 3 years later and I finish it and I go, oh great, now it's good. I don't know what needed to happen, but it just wasn't ready yet. So there's a few things like that.
Wow. Do you have that was as you're writing music? Is there any accompanying like soundtrack for Attaboy that you've written out?
No, I did that for Augmented Fourth. I actually got a band and we recorded a couple of like Black Sabbath-esque songs. That was a lot of fun. Attaboy, to me, I have a song on the trailer which is I didn't write, which is a very 8-bit kind of video game sound. It'd be something like that, or John Carpenter kind of synth sound. But I'm not capable of doing that. But that'd be the dream. But I have another project which I might do, which is basically like a vampire werewolf story, but it's basically about Iggy Pop and David Bowie and about their Berlin years. And so that I keep thinking of songs which I could apply to that. And that's almost like a weird spiritual sequel to Augmented Fourth. Right. But I don't know if I'm going to get to that ever either.
At what point would you ever be like, how close to the vest do you prefer your IPs to be? Would there ever be a point if someone says, hey, listen, I love what's going on with Lumen. Do you mind if I wrote a script? Could I? Yeah,
that's interesting. I never really thought of that. With Lumen or Attaboy, it could be interesting because, I love mainstream comic book characters. And so it is kind of fun to have like, oh, this is, Michael Golden's version of the Avengers, but there's also, this guy's version of the Avengers or, whoever, or, Sal Buscema's version. It'd be kind of cool to see what they could do with it. So for those that kind of make sense, Serious Creatures, I think is a little more like it's going to, and it's a finite story. I really see an end point to that. So that one I couldn't see, but I would love that. And I actually love, people have drawn, like before Attaboy even came out, people have been doing fan art, and I love it. It makes me feel so like good to see that. Like one guy, Jerome, made this like little clay version of him, of Attaboy, and he had like lasers coming out of his finger, and I was like, it's just beautiful. I love it. And so. And actually, I did a video real quick to show people how to draw his face, like a quick cheat, because it's a really weird triangular face with a flat head. So I was like, oh, you do it like this. This is how I do it. And no one's listened to it, but that's cooler. It's cool to see like, their visions of it. But
right.
And of course, if somebody like a creator who I like love, like if Michelle Fife or like Keith Giffen was like, oh, I want to do Attaboy, I'd be like, oh please, that'd be great. Like it's probably never gonna happen, but I'll be go ahead, go for it. If like Frank Miller's like, yeah, this idea for Lumen, I'm like, whatever you want to do, man. Like, hopefully it's more Dark Knight and less Holy Terror, but whatever you want to do, I'll look at it.
So let's kind of go through the pledge levels on this for you.
Yeah.
So first of all, you have and I think that the same pledge levels are on this side right here, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have the digital edition.
Right.
So, okay, my other question before we jump into this even further is, when you do this digital, because it's a treasury size, what DPI did you make this in?
It's actually, I think it's 500. It's not 600, because when I looked at it, I didn't see much of a difference when I zoomed in and stuff. So I was like, well, I'll make the file shorter, make it smaller. I'll just go for that. And it's funny, like I did an art book before this with the same printer, and that book's almost like a vinyl record size. I forget what the dimensions are, and the DPI on that was only 450, and it looked fine. And the images are blown up, and so I was like, well, I can get away with not doing 600 even on big images, so I'm going to do that. So the digital edition, I think, reads great. You do miss out on the giant rock concert event of like the print edition, but some people are into print, and that's fine with me. Also, it's cheaper for me. I don't have to ship it, so that's great.
Oh yeah, the PDF version of it.
Yeah.
And then you have but if you for $22, and I gotta say, $22 for a 74-page treasury, full color,
Yeah.
treasury size thing. That's a heck of a deal right there.
Thanks for, because I was actually really concerned. I actually went to Facebook months ago to ask people if they would pay that, because I would love to get it like $15 or $12 or something. I just couldn't find a price point that made sense unless I was going to print like 4,000 of these things. I couldn't. I would just end up, it cost me a lot of money.
Right.
Is it people? I think it is justified. It is like 3 issues of a comic. If my comics cost $5 each or $6 and it's oversized, it all kind of makes sense. But I'm a big stickler on, would I pay for this? And when I do a project, I always go, would I buy this, and would I pay the price? And eventually I was like, oh yeah, I would. Like, it's an indie book, so I accept things costing a little bit more if they're indie, because people don't have big companies behind them, and it being giant size and the full color, I was like, yeah, it's a good price. But I would love it for it to be $10 in every store in the world. I just haven't got there yet.
Right. And that's kind of like your masthead one right there. That's like that's your main pledge tier right there.
Yeah, and it's definitely the most popular. And I have a lot of this Kickstarter. I have a lot of new people who are buying all my books. There's a couple bundles, but there's also definitely some diehards who have bought everything else, so they don't need anything else. They just want to get the new book, and I get that.
Right. And then you have here like your 47 one, and that's where you have the Serious Creatures print edition as well. Right. Now, how many pages is in the Serious Creatures?
Oh, it's like 224. It's so big. It's six issues, and some of the issues one issue is almost double size, and they all kind of run long, and there's a lot of special features in Serious Creatures, right. A lot of behind the scenes kind of stuff in the back, and there's all these different essays. So it's gigantic. In fact, when I sell out of that original print run, I'm gonna redo it without some of the back matter, some of the essays, just to make it a little shorter and a little cheaper to print. Because luckily the Kickstarter, it all worked out. But in the future, it'll make the Kickstarter version a little more special anyways. But in the future, I'll be like, just go online. You can find those essays and all the extra stuff. But this is just the story itself. But it's huge.
Wow. And then for $67, so an extra $20, you get also the Serious Creatures and the Lumen print edition as well.
Right, and Lumen is like, I think 120 some pages. It's 4 issues, and they're kind of big too, and so that's kind of like, if you're new to me, and so a lot of people seem to be, this is like the Tony McMillen package. This is like the starter kit. This is like all the story stuff all the comic stuff you can want from me is all together.
Wow, that is awesome.
Oh,
and right there, and that also is an incredible deal for, if you look at page by page count and what you're getting on that.
Yeah, I think so. It's one of those things, like, I'm a big Copra fan, and Michel Fife, all his issues are at least 24 pages long, single issues. And I took that to heart. It's like, well, a lot of mainstream comics are 20 pages or 22 pages. And if you go back in the day, a lot of like Silver Age stuff is shorter than that. And in the Bronze Age, there's a period, I think Marvel did 18-page comics. And so I feel like you got to give people a little extra, a little bit more.
Right. And that's good. So that's what's exciting for you when you look at it from a person who does Kickstarters. There's 12 people back that. That means that's 12 new readers.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those things too. With my Kickstarters, I have yet to really, get any mainstream press that's made this thing explode. I'm doing really well, but I have a really small but really committed fan base, and so I have a lot of people who already bought the other book, so I really appreciate them getting the new book. So, but if there's 12 new people, that's amazing. I love that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then, so talk to us a bit about this. So this is also, you get the print edition, but you also get an original.
Yeah, and this one, it's basically, I draw all the time, and I have some good stuff, I think. And so I'm going to, and this one, I'll pick out some original art for you. You don't get it's not commissioned. So I have some stuff I'm willing to part with that I think is really good. So you get original, and it's 11 by 14. It's ink on the paper on Bristol board. And it's one of a kind. I mean, I don't draw the same thing twice. So you'll get something weird, something different, something something probably unlike anything you've seen before.
Hmm. And with that, you also have the ability, but here's where you can actually get a commission work though. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think I make a joke about how, don't feel like you shouldn't ask for Batman. I'm really good at drawing Batman. So, you think that's too common. I love drawing Batman because I find like, especially when I do like shows, sometimes people are like, oh, they're like, oh, let me think about something, you don't get usually asked to draw. And I was like, no, ask me to draw whatever I usually get asked to draw. Like, I'm good at that. So I'm like, I'm like, ask me to draw RoboCop or Batman. I can do those, like, and they're gonna look great. So yeah, the commission but you can do anything you want in this one. You can ask me to draw any character you can think of, and I'll do my version of it.
Okay, and so you have it says that the limited supply. So you have 2 backers already on that too. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, and some of the other tiers are more limited supplies as they go on. But I think almost nothing's been used up yet. So there's definitely there's slots available.
Slots available. Oh, for then you got that was for so for 100 you get the headshot, but for 200 you get a full body
Yeah,
character, huh?
yeah, because headshots it's a little easier. So I figure full body, a little more money, but I'll make it really dynamic. I love drawing characters in motion and characters doing action and stuff like that.
That's awesome. And then you have no, I can't remember in your previous. What did you have tiers like this in your previous Kickstarters? You said?
Yeah, these ones I did. But there is some stuff I did not do last time, which is coming up, which I'm pretty excited about.
And 300. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So talk to us about this here.
So this is this is like if you get all the books, all the comics I've done, but you also get I think I have 3 different drawings. Come with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I said, I have a lot of art, and I'm still creating lots of art almost every day. So I will pick out 3 gems for you and kind of set you on your path.
Okay.
And they're all 11 by 14. They're all very big.
So if you look at that compared to what you'd get on here, that's probably one of the best deals on here, though.
I think it is because those books as well as the art. I mean, yeah, you're actually saving some money big time on that.
Right. And then you have your original pages.
Yeah, and
here.
this is it's new to me. I've sold a few pages just individually to people but I usually don't sell pages. But I was convinced by a good friend who's a professional artist. He's like, "Why don't you sell your pages?" I was like, "Well, I don't know." He's like, "What are they doing?" And like, "They're in my basement." He's like, "They're just sitting there." He's like, "Yeah," and he's like, "Your book's done." I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Then you should sell them." I was like, "Yeah, I guess that makes sense." And so I selected some of my favorite pages that I think would look great on a wall. And there's a bunch of different choices. I think there's 11 choices.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
And what's cool is like there's individual pages, and they're all 11 by 17. They're all huge, and I don't clean anything up. So you get the blue pencil, you have the white out on them, you have my thumbprints. I use thumbprints for my art, so there's like thumbprint smudges, and there's also I'm also selling 2-page spreads, and there's some close-ups on some of the art, so you see like you see the raw kind of ore that makes comic books. And so the 2-page spreads are fun because they're 11 by 17, taped together in the back. There's these giant kind of almost mini murals.
Wow.
And so all those are, I've only sold 1 page, but they're very limited, and
they're one of a kind. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They're part of the book. Like actually, that's the one I sold right there, which is one of my favorites. So the one below that, I'm sorry, the one, yeah, it's Attaboy kind of jumping. I use that image on the back of the book as well. And these are the pages that I just think look the best and kind of tell a little story all by themselves.
Oh, that's awesome. That so and so yeah, and so one of your friends told you this would to do this then.
Yeah, he sells, he's a professional artist. He's like, yeah, but I do make some money selling my art. And he's like, the book is done. It's been printed. So this is just collecting dust in my, in his basement. He's like, if someone is willing to pay for your pages, you might want to consider selling those pages. And eventually I was like, yeah, he's right. Because, part of me has this, this idea that, maybe in 5 or 10 years, it's not unfeasible that my name might be a little more known and that these pages might go for more. But at the same time, in 5 or 10 years, I'll probably be making more books. And so I could part with some of this stuff.
Right. And that's one of the benefits of actually having a physical copy of your work, is that you can
Right.
sell that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But it's been fun, and I actually like the idea of someone, take, either putting it on their wall or looking at it. And what's cool, I always love about original art is you can see like the choices, like they're right there. There's some blue pencil Attaboy who's below the actual inked Attaboy, where I decided, no, I think he'll look better up here. And there's little things like that, which if you compare it to the original pages, you can see the changes, or you can just see, oh, he whited this out. This is supposed to be that. I love that kind of stuff. I poured over like the Dark Knight Returns artist edition, and I love seeing like all the mistakes basically, and all the cool little things you don't see on the finished page. It's really fun to see behind the curtain, I think.
Right. Yeah. Wow. And so how does it, so when you do this, so I'm kind of curious about this from from a creation perspective.
Mm.
You draw this out, you kind of sketch it out, and then you ink it in. Scanner, or you take a photo with your phone? How does that work?
Oh no, I use the scanner, and actually, I learned this from Eric Larson of Savage Dragon fame. He was talking online, and because I had a smaller scanner, I was like, "How do you do these giant pages?" Like, oh, you use Photoshop, and there's a thing called Automate, Photo Merge. So I scan a page 4 times or sometimes 6 times. I click automate Photo Merge, and it can makes it one big image, and it's seamless.
Wow.
And so that's what I do. And so that's been the process so far. And of course I ink, or don't ink, I'm sorry, I color digitally. And so then I feed them into I've been using a Procreate on the iPad Pro, which is great because it has a stylus, so it mimics kind of actually coloring by hand. And I learned that from watching Tom Scioli, who did, I love his work. He did Transformers versus G.I. Joe, and he did a bunch of other comics, but he was actually coloring on that too. And and his color looks very much like crayon and watercolor and stuff like that. I try to make my coloring emulate, and he was able to achieve that with digital means, and I couldn't tell. So that made me go, okay, I can do this digitally, and I think it will still approximate or achieve what the organic look I'm after.
Right. Yeah. And so, but how do you, when you scan it in, what do you do to get rid of the blue lines?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's real easy. So basically, there's I don't remember what it's called, but basically, there's a little drop down that it's a blue filter, and anything blue, it takes it away. And then I had to mess with some of the contrast, because sometimes the blue line will remain as a sort of a white line, but a slight adjustment on the contrast, and then it disappears completely.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
that really saved me a lot, because I used to pencil and then erase, and I'm really a really bad eraser, or it just took a lot of time and it was really sloppy, and every once in a while it smudged my ink and I didn't like it. And with the blue pencil, it made it real seamless, made it real quick, and it wasn't painstaking, and so I love that.
Right. I got to say, when I remember watching this, kind of following this creation. So you had this going on because you mentioned, as I were talking at the top of the hour, you were working on this around October, so you kind of started posting things about it. But you said, so this was in your head because you mentioned you already had like an Attaboy.
Yeah.
So how long have you been thinking about Attaboy as a character?
Yeah, at least 4 years, almost from the start of Lumen. And funny, Lumen was gonna be my video game manual comic book.
Okay.
But it basically, when I was doing that, I didn't really I hadn't cracked the code on what will make that work as a book, and so I just made it a normal comic book. And think about Attaboy, I had this kind of character design, and actually Attaboy's design with Lumen, I kind of fell into. I like triangular masks and faces, and I started thinking about, well, what if Esteban from Lumen had he didn't have a mask, but he had sort of like a gambit kind of like head sock thing. And I was like, oh, it'll still be triangular, and eventually that became Attaboy's design, and so it's still very indebted to Lumen, but I kept thinking about Attaboy. I was like, okay, this should be the video game manual book, but I was like, I don't know how to make it, because initially I was like, it'll be more of an art book with sort of the format of a video game manual, but I won't be a comic book. It won't be panels. It'll just have like some prose and then some art. And eventually, which is it seems pretty simple now, but I was like, it should be a comic book, and which is funny. I make comic books, so you think I would just come to that conclusion, but I didn't. It took me a while to get there, and once I realized that, it all came together, and I kind of figured out the approach to it. But Attaboy, like a lot of things, I think about them a lot for years sometimes, and I'm waiting for one little piece to fall in place, and when that falls in place, and it's not that when that piece falls in place, I know exactly what I'm going to do. It just there's enough for me to go, just jump off the cliff and go for it.
Right.
And because I do some planning and I like to plot, but I don't like to have everything so tight that I can't change my mind. So I just need enough to get going, I think, and it takes years sometimes.
Yeah. That because it just seemed like it was almost like just a tidal wave of just creativity. I just like it was like then you had this and then you had this and then you had this, and all of a sudden, like a few months later, I'm launching my Kickstarter. I'm like, wow, that was really fast.
Well, thanks. It's one of those things. I think it did go kind of fast, but the truth is, behind the scenes, I have been thinking about this a lot. And one thing that helps, I think, especially as a comic book, if you take years, you can draw a character and actually figure out how you want them to look visually. And like a lot of books, you'll see an artist jump like John Byrne on X-Men, and he's good, but maybe 5-6 issues in, his characters start looking like, oh, that's the Colossus that John Byrne draws. That's the Wolverine he draws.
Right.
It's like he figures out what he wants to do with them, and that's even for me. That's the same thing. Like like Esteban from Lumen. That was years before I finished. I started the comic book. I kept drawing him. The early versions, the colors are all different. His visual is very different. You can kind of see, it's getting there. But it took me a while, and even by issue 3 or 4, that I think I figured out exactly how I wanted him to look.
Right.
And I think that does help. If you take a little time and figure out how you want to do it, yeah.
Yeah. And we just had our mutual friend Greg just said that he's just supported it today. Yeah. So,
dude, I saw it, Greg. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, you supported it too. I think a lot, Barney.
Yeah. I like for me, there is a level of nostalgia about something that I'm not sure. It's like you say, it's like your how you wrote it as your log line, I think is fantastic. I mean, it's like that. It's like there's a video game from when I was a kid that no one else seems to remember.
Right.
That is a great log line. That immediately makes me want to go, I needed to learn more about this. And then, yeah.
Thank you. And that's one of the last pieces when I was figuring out how am I going to write this. I thought of that line. It's like, oh, that's my in. That's what my kind of lens is going to be. And I really fixate on opening lines to stories. And like Serious Creatures, eventually when I was like, when I thought of like the opening line is in the end, it was all the shark's fault. And I was like, oh, that's weird. That's kind of that's what I need to open with. So I think the entire story is important, but beginnings are really important. And if you have a line that can kind of get readers to be curious, but also kind of give a little bit of a hint about what kind of story you're going to get, I think that's the way to go.
Right. So real quick. So as I say, congratulations on reaching your goal.
Thanks.
Do you have already on there? Do you have any? Do you have the
stretch goals?
Yeah, stretch goals.
No, I don't, because I thought about doing it, but I was like, well, the truth is, like, I've seen some Kickstarters they do really well, and they have a bunch of stretch goals, and then a couple years later, the creator will have this like a blog post going, I messed up. I basically had to print a bunch of extra stuff, and I didn't factor in shipping, and then I lost a bunch of money. So it's like, it's like a don't do what I did kind of thing. So I'm like, I don't want to be that guy ever.
Right.
And so I did consider like doing some cool like some stickers or what, especially if it's video game. That's like, can I do some sort of like fake cartridge thing? And eventually I was like, stop. Like it's fine just to have the comic book and have some cool original art. And so I'm not going to do stretch goals. So I'm sorry people are excited about that kind of thing. I'm not that creative. I just do comic books.
But it's good. People know what they're getting. I think, which is good. It's like yeah.
Well, also as a consumer, I back Kickstarters a lot, and when there's too many options, I do get kind of overwhelmed. And so I try to keep it fairly simple. There are a lot of options when it comes to original art at the end of it, but before that, it's like you can get the book, you can get my other books, you can get some original art. I just try to keep it like it's like when you go to a restaurant, if you have like to turn like 4 or 5 pages of a menu, that's a little bit much for me. I just like to flip it and figure out what's good on there.
Right. Well, as I say, Tony, congratulations on this. This
Thanks,
was
man.
fantastic. I'm excited to check it out. I'm excited to read it, and make sure come back on again to talk about your new books that you're going to be putting out later.
Thank you so much. I will definitely do that. I love being here. Again, I want to become a friend of the show. I want to earn the title. So that's the new goal.
You're the friend of the show. How about that? There you go.
Oh, nice. Achievement unlocked.
Achievement unlocked. All right. Well, thanks again, Tony, and congratulations again on reaching your goal.
Thanks, Barney. I really appreciate it.
And I was doing the math. You were on episode, I think it was 35 last time, and now this is, I think I got it. Yeah, episode 89 now. So.
Oh, wow, man, you've been trucking along.
I've been trucking along, man.
Yeah. Is this year 2 or 3 of the podcast or of the show?
2. This is year 2. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, you've been, yeah, man. And I think you're like my second or third. I can't remember of my being on twice too. So
see, I want to earn like friend of the show like next time, like
we had all right, here's my because every time you come on, my intro for you gets a little bit longer because you already have something new posted, and
I like it. Yep.